One second you're driving 160 miles an hour in a Porsche, and the next,
calling all units 675 Main. Backup needed.
These are the untold stories of some of football's most iconic players. By the time Zlatan Ibrahimovic turned 19, he was already one of Sweden's most notorious figures. But how did that happen? Growing up, Zlatan didn't know any better. His mom was incarcerated, and his dad, struggling with alcoholism, could barely afford food. Desperate for money, food, and a way out, Zlatan made himself a promise. If he ever saw a light at the end of the tunnel, he wouldn't let off the gas. That determination led to the craziest night of his life. In his teenage years, Zlatan was committed to two goals: becoming a pro footballer and having a cool car. But despite playing in youth clubs, it wasn't enough. He needed money. Publicly, he worked at his local dock, but behind the scenes, he led a double life, stealing bikes and shoplifting just to eat. The thrill of cash and adrenaline consumed him, and his football career began slipping away. Eventually, Zlatan saved enough to buy a Porsche Turbo, but it came with a price. He drove fast, loving the adrenaline, until the police started chasing him. Zlatan didn't stop, weaving through streets until he found a tunnel and hid there, watching the cops speed by.
I drove until I found that tunnel underneath the highway, and I was waiting there, and they kept going.
He got away, but that night changed him. Lying in bed, his heart racing, Zlatan realized he had to channel that same killer instinct into football, or his life would spiral. That decision turned him into one of the sport's most lethal strikers. But Zlatan wasn't the only one facing trouble off the pitch. Back in 2017, Romelu Lukaku was setting records on and off the field. But deep down, something was off. Playing at Everton, Lukaku knew his time there had peaked, and he needed a change. After receiving a text from his boy Pogba, he decided to gamble with his career. On July 1st, Lukaku demanded a transfer and booked a vacation. He fled to Beverly Hills with Pogba, renting a mansion straight out of a movie, anxiously waiting for his transfer to be finalized. And when it was official, they didn't just call it a night, they celebrated hard. But it wasn't long before the neighbors called the cops, 6 times. When the police arrived, Lukaku was arrested, but his millions saved him with a fine. It could have been worse though, like the time Sergio Ramos almost lost his life. Ramos was a wild one, even as a kid. Growing up in Sevilla, he craved danger and thrill, much to his parents' dismay. Concerned about his reckless biking habits, they forced his older brother to convince him to take up football. Ramos thrived in the sport, but secretly, he still lived dangerously, sneaking off to ride his bike. That is, until a horrific accident with his brother-in-law changed everything. Ramos nearly went blind and spent over a year in recovery, enduring immense pain.
En las motos ya desde el club y bueno, pues una desgracia, un accidente que tuve con...
Against all odds, he bounced back and became a greater player than ever. But even after facing death, Ramos couldn't resist the thrill. In 2021, he was back on the bike. Let's just hope it doesn't land him in the ER again. Another player who faced life-threatening danger was Virgil van Dijk. In 2010, he was just starting to find his place in football, but still struggling financially. To help his family, Van Dijk worked part-time as a dishwasher. But when his boss gave him an ultimatum, football or his job, Van Dijk chose his dream. That year, he switched positions and started dominating the field, earning a transfer to a Dutch pro club and a spot on the national team. But out of nowhere, his health took a turn. One day at practice, he felt off, nauseous and tired. Assuming it was just a cold, Van Dijk left to rest but quickly got worse. His chest felt like it was being stabbed and he could barely stand. His mom rushed him to the hospital, where doctors discovered his appendix had burst. His stomach was inflamed and his kidneys were failing. He was dying. Miraculously, they saved him just in time, and Van Dijk vowed to never take life for granted again. While Van Dijk's story is about survival, Ronaldo's is about betrayal. In 2017, Ronaldo trusted a travel agent to handle his flights, but little did he know, she was stealing from him. Maria Silva, a 53-year-old woman, gained Ronaldo's trust and access to his banking information. For years, Ronaldo traveled without issue, until one day, his accountant noticed something strange. Hundreds of flights charged to Ronaldo's account, even though he hadn't taken them. An investigation revealed that Silva had been secretly booking flights and pocketing the fees. She stole over $300,000 from Ronaldo, using his wealth to fund her lavish lifestyle. When detectives cracked the case, she was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay back the money. Now, you won't believe the time a football player planned his own kidnapping in the middle of a game. Yeah, this is one of the wildest football stories ever. It was 2019, and we're in Sicily, home of the mafia. A group of ski-masked criminals were about to pull off something insane. Why? Because this wasn't just any game. It was a championship match, and all eyes were on the pitch. But no one had a clue things were about to get real crazy, especially Ignacio Barbagallo, who was playing the final match of his career. Ignacio was looking to go out with a bang, but little did everyone know, he had a much bigger plan. Just as the game was heating up, a van sped onto the field. Ski-masked figures jumped out and snatched Ignacio right off the pitch. The crowd was shocked. What just happened? The game turned into a full-on investigation, and the entire city of Sicily was in chaos. The police launched a massive manhunt, hunting for any clues to track down the culprits. Football competitions were even banned across the city for 3 months. It became the most talked about scandal in Italian football. But here's the twist. Turns out, Ignacio planned the whole thing himself. Yeah, he staged the entire kidnapping just to make the news. Talk about going out with a bang, right? Ignacio didn't just want to retire quietly. He wanted to make sure his name made headlines. But in the end, it wasn't the football match that went down in history. It was his stage stunt that everyone remembers. These stories show that off the pitch, football players face challenges just as intense as their games. Whether it's crime, near-death experiences, or betrayal, these legends overcame it all to become who they are today. So I'm not sure what's worse, paying that massive fine or spending 4 years without being able to hit play on this video right here.